Hello and welcome to our Analytics Breakthrough webinar series. Excited to have Irv Shapiro with us today. And before we get started with Irv and get to learn from his insights and his experience in the industry, I'd like to introduce myself, Faris Al-Hudud, co-founder and principal consultant at Enor, and helped Eric in writing the book. And also with me here, my colleague and friend Eric Fettman. He's one of our senior team members and also our analytics trainer and coach. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Faris, and welcome to Irv. So, Faris would like to introduce Irv formally.
Of course. So I've known Irv for a number of years. Met him at conferences. I think maybe 6-7 years ago, and used this technology in different companies. If you're in phone and phone tracking and phone as a channel, which we will hear a lot from Irv about later in the webinar, I think you're here for a lot to learn. Irv is the CEO of Dialog Tech. It's an Inc. 500 company, voice-based marketing, automation space. As I said, Irv has been around for a long time in the industry. He knows the space really well, very, very successful entrepreneur in different capacities. So we're really excited to have you on with us, Irv.
Well, Faris, thank you very much for the introduction. I think indirectly you just called me an old guy, but that's okay.
A lot of wisdom. I didn't nothing to do with age.
Well, I hope I have wisdom. I surely have age. So we have an exciting topic that we're ready to kick off whenever you're ready.
So, go ahead, Eric.
So what I'd like folks to do, because we don't have a visual for this, is to sit back in your chairs and draw a picture in your mind's eye as we speak. And let's talk about first the typical customer buying experience 30 years ago. So what were your choices 30 years ago? Well, you could walk into a store. You could receive a catalog in the mail and call a telephone number and talk to somebody in a call center. Or perhaps a salesperson came to your home. Those of us that are old enough, and I surely am, remember life insurance salespeople coming and sitting on the couch with my father to sell him life insurance. Those days are very different. Now, sit back and think about the customer buying experience 10 years ago. How was it different? Well, perhaps, let's say you wanted to buy a new car. So you and your partner got up from the couch. You went to the PC in the corner of your family room. You went into Google or Bing or Yahoo and you searched for Ford Explorer. You got to a website, you looked at some information, and then you filled in a contact form to have somebody get back to you. Interesting buying experience. It evolved. E-commerce was now a thing. There were things that you could purchase, products you could purchase, by just going online and buying them. But in fact, e-commerce was a very small part of our economy 10 years ago. Most of the time you were using the web for research and then buying the same way you always bought. You were making a phone call, you were walking into a store, you were calling somebody, you were engaging with a salesperson. Now, let's bring it all the way to today. So the first thing we think about today is, wow, e-commerce has changed the world. It's put brick and mortar stores out of business. Because we hear these statistics every year about how fast Amazon is growing and about all of the transactions done online and how Walmart buys Jet for $1 billion because they want to get into the e-commerce business. And you would think from that that e-commerce is now I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of our economy. Well, guess what? E-commerce ended last year at under 10% of our economy. Let's think about it. We all buy lots of things online now, but the big things, the important things, the complicated things, and most business-to-business transactions are not e-commerce transactions. Let me give you a couple examples. So let's say mom is getting a little older. Thank goodness she doesn't need to go into a home, but I really need to have somebody stay with her for nights. So you want to hire a caregiver. Are you going to drop that caregiver into a shopping cart and put in a credit card? Probably not. You're probably going to Google caregivers in Cincinnati. You're going to look at some websites and you're going to call the business. Let's think about that life insurance. You think a sales rep's going to come to your house and sit on the couch and talk to you? Not likely anymore. But you're probably not going to buy life insurance that nobody understands without talking to somebody, having somebody explain it to them. How are they going to explain that? Over the phone. Let's think about buying that Ford Explorer and the customer journey today. Well, instead of you and your partner getting up from the couch, you pull your phones out of your pocket. Doesn't matter whether it's an Android smartphone or an iOS smartphone or something new in the future. You pull your phone out of your pocket. You Google, you find information about Ford Explorers, you pass your phones back and forth. Did you see this? Did you see that? Then you look at your watch and you say, wow, it's 7:15. I wonder if the dealers are still open. You go to the link on the website in the mobile app, you find the number of a dealer, you call that dealer. They answer the phone. You say to yourself, oh yeah, we're here till 9, come on in. Now, maybe at that point, you get up and you go into a dealer, you test drive an Explorer and you really like it. So you go home, you're thinking about it, and the next day, what do? You call 5 other dealers to see who's going to give you the best price. Ultimately, you go into a dealer and you buy the car. So your customer journey, your customer experience started online in a mobile online experience. It moved to the phone. It moved to a physical visit. It went back to the phone for an extensive period of time, and then ultimately you bought the car and you physically drove it out of a showroom. Now, if I'm a business, what information would I like to have along the way? Well, perhaps I'd want to know what ad drove that original phone call. So picture this customer journey in your mind and think about all the points where you'd want information. What ad drove that phone call? Who answered the phone? How long did they spend in the call? It'd be really nice if the call was recorded and transcribed and I had all the words from the call. So I could say for this ad, the call-through rate or phone-through rate is 8%. The average call duration is 6 minutes. Salespeople that say these words close the most business. So on the front end, I know what ads to spend money on. I optimize my ad spend. On the back end, I optimize my sales process. Now, you might be asking, this is a webinar about analytics in the Google ecosystem. How does this all apply? Well, back about 3-4 years ago, might be 5 years ago now, Ferris, you can help me with this date, Google introduced something at the time they called Google Universal Analytics. Today, we all know it as just Google Analytics. It's now replaced the classic form. What was the revolution in Universal? Well, one of the revolutionary things was that you could have external events that you could record in Google Analytics. And you had an API for inserting those events. So if I'm using Google Analytics to manage my digital ad spend, then right alongside my SEO, my paid data, my display data, I would also like to see my call data. And that's possible via integrations with companies that have a voice management system that allows you to integrate the voice component, voice as a channel, within the customer journey with Google Analytics. And we are pleased to participate in this relatively new book describing ways to use Google Analytics. And I was fortunate enough to be a participant in contributing material about how to see call data in Google Analytics. Ferris, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Irvin. And yes, it was, I think it was 2013 when Universal was available, and then it was out of beta for sure in 2014. So yeah, that was a sort of a changing, big change in the industry, because now you want beyond just thinking of analytics as in the web context, but in sort of to other interactions, as you noted. No, that's great, and again, we really appreciate your contribution to the book. Eric, I know you had some comments and questions, so I'll over to you.
Thanks, Irv. Thanks for that background. It was interesting. I didn't really consider the universal aspect, the Google Analytics universal aspect of the dialogue tech integration, but that makes perfect sense, because I think when Google Analytics Universal came out, to some extent there was confusion, because I think people on some level, end users, were looking for more differences, say, in the user interface than there actually were. Most of the end user functionality in Google Analytics did not change from going from classic, as we call it now, to universal. But the real universal part of universal is being able to track data from any programmable network environment. And it's interesting, Irv, because I wasn't thinking about the dialogue tech integration in terms of universal, but that's another great example of how we're going beyond website tracking and even app tracking per se, and we're pulling in data from another environment. So the promise of universal is to transcend the bounds of any device or any environment. Basically, if you can program it and you can send HTTP requests, you can get data into Google Analytics. So that's interesting from an implementation standpoint. And
yes, and it did make it much cleaner. Now, prior to Universal, Dialog Tech did via reverse engineering, which probably was a violation of Google's terms, but via reverse engineering, we were already inserting data into analytics by effectively emulating their JavaScript. But Universal Analytics really took Google to a new level. And into today's world of IoT and instrumentation of a variety of devices and technologies, Google is very, very well positioned to be the data repository for all of that data. Because with the universal endpoints, with the universal API, there's no reason your refrigerator can't pump data effectively into Google, or your automobile, or more importantly, a beacon when you walk past the store, so that, as an example, you could see ad spend, you could see actual store visitors because the beacon recognizes that, then you could see calls, and you'd have a universal, Google Universal was a great name, but you'd have a universal view of the environment around you.
That's right. That's right. The Google Analytics actually is, because of the universal openness now, really is in a great position with the Internet of Things. I think that the universal name was applied maybe before the Internet of Things concept even was named as such. But that's you're absolutely right that universal analytics is in a great positioned to serve as a repository for all kinds of behavioral data. So, and I'm sure we'll see more and more interesting implementations like what you've done with Dialogue Tech. But or just looking at the sample report that we have in the book. So this actually shows the Dialogue Tech calls. So apparently you can integrate your Dialogue Tech calls either as essentially a custom metric or as event data, which I think that flexibility in itself is really cool, because we could have a metric that appears, let's say, in the channels report, like we're looking at now. So we could see the channels that are driving traffic and the channels that are driving calls, and we know that, you know better than anyone else, that the missing piece in conversion tracking is always phone calls. I mean, as a business, I am happy if someone transacts with me online, or if someone calls. May even be happier if someone calls, because there may be a bigger connection and potentially a broader opportunity if someone calls. But how do we know that in Google Analytics? If we are spending money on display ads and that is generating 105 phone calls like we're displaying here, we want to know that the money that we're spending, or any effort that we're making for acquiring traffic, if that is resulting in an action that's important to us, we want to make sure that that's tracked. And certainly when someone is calling us, that is a heightened level of user engagement. And at a minimum, we have to track it, probably even want to track it as a goal. If we go with the event option for the phone call tracking, we could actually track phone calls as a goal. And to me, that would be, even though people may not be purchasing or ultimately converting offline, if someone is engaged enough to make a phone call, at a minimum, to me, that's a macro conversion, and that should be tracked as a conversion.
Right. So phones are very interesting because they inherently communicate urgency. When you fill in a form or you send an email, your expectation that someone will get back to you at a later date. Now, you might expect they'll get back to you relatively quickly, but it's not an immediate connection. When you click on a call extension, or you dial a phone number you see on a website, or for that matter, you call a phone number you see in a television commercial, and those calls could show up here in Google also, and they could be listed as a source of television, you expect immediate results. Now, when you expect immediate results, you're also signaling, whether you want to or not, that you're ready to buy. So for a business, that's a very high value opportunity.
That's right. That's right. And there certainly is more inherently, as you said, and there's an inherently more urgency. If you send an email, if you submit a form, it's not necessarily expected that you will be answered right away. And you're absolutely right. People are signaling that they are inherently more targeted when they make a phone call than when they submit a form. Irv, if you could share with us some of the most important insights that companies that you have worked with have gained with the call tracking, both good surprises, maybe channels that they thought were performing better, could have been performing better in terms of phone call tracking that weren't really meeting expectations. What are some of the insights and successes and data-driven decisions that you and companies that you work with have been able to take and to make based on the call tracking data?
So the most value that we're able to deliver is to a particular type of business. while we have value to any type of business, if you're a large business with hundreds or thousands of people in call centers, you're already probably analyzing those behaviors. You may not have the call tracking up front, but you're very focused on those call centers. But in fact, there is a type of business in the United States that generates over 2 trillion with a T, $2 trillion of business a year. And that's all of the businesses with centralized marketing and distributed sales. Let's think about some examples of that. Auto manufacturers. Ford, Nissan, Land Rover, Jaguar, BMW, they produce cars centrally. They run ads on the Super Bowl and everywhere else centrally. They participate extensively in the digital marketplace centrally. And they drive leads, opportunities that are often delivered as phone calls to a dealer network where the salesperson picking up the phone doesn't work for the auto manufacturer. The salesperson works for some local businesswoman, some local businessman. Right. And in fact, they have no visibility into what was said, how it was said, how that salesperson related to the advertising media. So A, they don't know which ads are working. B, they don't know how to optimize their website or their media properties or their apps to provide consumers with the best information.
So this is the central team. So this is the central digital experience, digital marketing team who doesn't know how to optimize their experience because they don't know if they're succeeding or not.
That's exactly right. And C, they can't even coach the local dealer salespeople about better ways to handle the customer because they're not involved. Let's take another example. Let's say you're in the educational business, in the tutoring business, and you have 1,000 franchise operators across the United States. Market centrally, the leads go to local franchise operators. Let's say you're in the life insurance business. Well, life insurance, by definition, the person today, this may change in the future, but the person today that takes your call has to be licensed to sell life insurance in your state. So you can't just have a bunch of people in a centralized call center that aren't licensed in the individual states. So most life insurance companies send calls to the agents in the field. If you're a financial advisor, what if you're a plumber? You don't want a plumber in North Dakota taking your call if you have a leaky faucet in Illinois. They're not going to be able to help you. So if you add up all of the categories where you have centralized marketing and distributed sales, it's $2 trillion of business in the United States each year.
Okay.
For those businesses, having insights into the advertising spend, the digital spend that drives calls is a game changer. Here's what we've learned so far. A, we can tell you absolutely that the AdWords and the campaigns that drive form fills and the AdWords and the campaigns that drive phone calls are different.
Interesting.
And we have data from our customers showing a difference of 20 to 80%. The call to action needs to be different. For one thing, you have to start by putting a phone number on the ad, which you might not have thought of before. The second thing we can tell you is, to date at least, calls off of display are very low volume. Most people are not calling off display ads. Call off of call extensions and landing pages are higher volume.
So if the phone number is just in a display ad and someone hasn't actually performed a search that generated the ad, the call volumes are low, but the call volumes are higher on actual search ads and also when people click through to a landing page?
That is correct. That's what we're finding.
Okay.
That's what we're finding. Display in social, specifically Facebook, is starting to pick up a little bit. But the majority of calls still come from search. And search resulting in either a PPC ad, a call extension, or organic and a landing page.
And
Now,
in terms
that
of
behavior will probably shift annually, but that's where it's at right now.
and in terms of Ferris,
You know,
go ahead.
no, thank you for sharing. These are actually really, really insightful numbers. We'll make sure to point those out even in our blog post and when we socialize this webinar. You know, a lot of I know a lot of marketers are always looking for industry numbers and benchmarks, and you sharing this is, I think, is very, very valuable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Irv, could you talk to us a little bit more about the B2B scenarios that you alluded to earlier? How have B2B businesses found utility with call tracking?
So here's an interesting anomaly. It's sort of actually humorous. One of the most rapidly growing segments of technology businesses are called SaaS businesses, software as a service. Software as a service would include Dialog Tech, it would include HubSpot, it would include Salesforce, it would include Marketo, it would include any business where you're taking effectively an application and you're moving it to the cloud, to the network, to a offsite location. And most software as a service is defined today as applications that are accessed via a browser. NetSuite. We use NetSuite for our accounting. Online access via a browser. More and more employees of major businesses spend their time in a browser as the application interface. Here's the irony. 99% of those businesses sell with inside sales teams, people answering the phone. And the vast majority of businesses do not sign up for contracted SaaS services by just going to a website and filling in credentials. At least not for those services that are more than, let's say, $1,000 a month.
Right. That makes sense.
So all of those SaaS businesses that are telling us move our processes online are selling with people sitting on the phones all day long. So how do they receive those phone calls? They spend money on digital advertising. And since their outcome that they're looking for, the event, the conversion they're looking for is a phone call, if they don't measure those phone calls, they don't know what ads are working.
Right, and that is funny. That is a little bit ironic that the SaaS companies who are encouraging us to go online are doing the converting offline. But that only makes sense because you're not. If it's software as a service, it's probably going to be something relatively business critical. You're not buying a pair of shoes, so you want to have the assurance of the person of first of all speaking with someone directly and understand the type of support that you would get. Probably the initial contact would be an indication of what your interactions would be like with the company going forward. So that it's ironic, but that makes complete sense.
So we call all of those commerce transactions where phone calls are important because as human beings, we want to talk about complex things. We call those considered purchases.
Right.
And generally, we find that for considered purchases, there has to be a human-to-human engagement, either in person or over the phone, or phone is a euphemism for voice communications. Because in the future, it might not be a phone, but it's still humans talking to humans.
Yeah, and there's no, whether it's just voice communication or communication in person, there's just no replacement for that. Efficiency, the efficiency in direct voice communication, and just all of the kind of meta communication that goes on, if we want to call it that, with direct voice or in-person communication. There is no substitute for that written communication could provide. So, Irv, we are at time now, so I want to make sure, and I'm not sure if Ferris has. I'm not sure if Ferris is. Yeah, Ferris is still with us. So
I'm here. Go ahead. Yeah.
So to connect with Irv, visit dialogtech.com. You could email Irv directly at ishapiro@dialogtech.com, and of course, after all that talk about direct voice communication, call this number to speak with the good folks at Dialogtech, and to stay connected with us, Ferris and myself and Enor team. You could check out the material that we produce on the Enor blog, and we have other folks from the industry joining us on the Breakthrough Webinar series. And if you haven't had a chance to pick up our book yet, to which Irv contributed and other industry folks contributed, as well as the Enor team, make sure to check it out. We've gotten happily very good feedback on it. So, Ferris, do you want to say any parting words?
Thank you so much, Eric. Irv, it was a pleasure having you with us. Thank you again for contributing to the book, and keep us all informed about phone as a channel, so we don't have any blind spots in our marketing attribution and our optimization efforts. Thank you so much, Irv.
Okay, have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Irvin. Thanks, folks, for attending.